The notification popped up on my phone at 3:47 in the morning, and my blood went cold. Someone had just gone live on a streaming platform I'd never heard of, and they were broadcasting my bedroom. My bedroom. While I slept. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard, I thought it might break through. The phone trembled in my hands as I stared at the thumbnail. A grainy image of my nightstand. My lamp. The corner of my own bed visible in the frame. The stream had already been going for 43 minutes. 43 minutes of my private space exposed to strangers on the internet. My name is Jalene Price. I'm 58 years old, and I've spent my entire adult life building walls around my privacy. After my husband left me 15 years ago, I learned the hard way that the world doesn't care about your boundaries unless you enforce them ruthlessly. I kept my home locked tight. I didn't use social media. I didn't even have a smartphone until 5 years ago, and I resisted that purchase for months. But someone had found a way past all my careful defenses, and they were selling glimpses of my most intimate space to an audience of strangers. My hands shook as I climbed out of bed, my legs unsteady beneath me. I moved through the darkness of my bedroom, searching for the camera, my mind racing through possibilities. Hidden in the smoke detector? Behind the mirror? In the corner of the closet? I pulled open drawers, ran my fingers along the baseboards, checked every surface. Nothing. The stream continued on my phone, now 47 minutes in, showing nothing but my empty bed, the impression of where my body had been still visible on the mattress. I had to think. Had to stay calm. My daughter Miretta lived 3 houses down the street. She worked in tech, understood these things better than I did. But it was almost 4 in the morning. I couldn't call her yet. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I took a screenshot of the stream and started trying to trace it back, clicking through the platform's labyrinthine settings with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. The platform was called Stream Vault, and it appeared to be some kind of niche social network where people shared live feeds from their homes. The channel name was simply Daily Life 847. No profile picture, no bio. Just a series of timestamps showing when broadcasts had occurred. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through them. The earliest one was dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Someone had been broadcasting my home for 3 weeks, and I hadn't known. I made it to my kitchen and poured myself a glass of water with hands that wouldn't steady. The house felt different now, contaminated somehow. Every room suddenly felt like a stage, every corner a potential hiding place for a camera lens. I thought about all the things I'd done in this house over the past 3 weeks. All the moments I'd considered private. All the vulnerable times I'd been alone. The rage that followed was immediate and all-consuming. It started as a hot knot in my chest and spread outward until my entire body was vibrating with it. Someone had violated me. Someone had taken my sanctuary and turned it into entertainment. And they'd been doing it for weeks while I'd walked around completely unaware. I called Miretta at 6:15 a.m., unable to wait any longer. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thick with sleep until I started talking. Then she was awake, really awake, asking me to send her the screenshots, telling me not to touch anything else on the stream. "Don't touch anything," she repeated, her voice sharp. "If this is what I think it is, we need to preserve everything. We might need it for the police." The police. Of course, I had to report this. The thought made me feel sick, admitting to strangers that my home had been violated, that I'd been watched without my knowledge. But I also knew Miretta was right. This wasn't something I could handle alone. She arrived at my house at 7:30 a.m., still in her pajamas, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was 32, but looked younger in the early morning light, her face creased with concern. She didn't waste time with greetings. Instead, she went straight to my laptop and started working, her fingers flying across the keyboard with the kind of confidence that came from years of working in cybersecurity. "This is sophisticated," she said after about 10 minutes, her voice tight. "Whoever did this knows what they're doing. They've routed the signal through multiple VPNs. It's going to be hard to trace." "Can you do it?" I asked, standing behind her chair, watching the code scroll across the screen in a blur of green text. "Maybe. But we need to report this to the police first. They'll have resources we don't." She turned to look at me, her eyes filled with something that looked like anger on my behalf. "And we need to find that camera. It has to be somewhere in your house." We spent the next 2 hours searching. Miretta was methodical about it, checking every surface, every corner, every piece of furniture. I followed behind her, watching as she examined my home with the intensity of someone looking for a bomb. Which, in a way, she was. It was in the guest bedroom, hidden inside a decorative picture frame on the shelf. A frame I'd owned for years without ever really looking at it. The frame contained a photograph of my parents, taken decades ago when I was just a child. Behind the glass, barely visible, was a tiny lens. Miretta photographed it before carefully removing it, her movements precise and deliberate. "Don't touch it with your bare hands," she said. "We need to preserve any fingerprints or DNA." I stood in the doorway of that room, staring at the frame, and felt something inside me crack. Someone had been in my house. Someone had placed this camera here deliberately. Someone had chosen this frame, a frame with a photo of my deceased parents, to hide their violation of my privacy. The cruelty of that choice felt intentional, like they were mocking me somehow. "Who would do this?" I whispered. Miretta didn't answer. She was already on her phone, calling the police. The police arrived 40 minutes later. 2 officers in a patrol car, both looking vaguely uncomfortable about the nature of the call. I gave them the basic facts. Someone had been streaming my home without my consent. I'd discovered it this morning. We'd found a camera. One of the officers took notes while the other examined the frame with the lens, photographing it from multiple angles. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" the younger officer asked, her name tag reading Officer Santa Cole. I shook my head. "No, I can't think of anyone." But even as I said it, my mind was already working through possibilities. Who had access to my house? Who would have a reason to do this? My mind kept circling back to the same people. Miretta, my ex-husband Olian, my sister Teslina. But none of them made sense. Miretta was here helping me. Olian had moved to California 15 years ago and had no reason to come back. Teslina lived 3 states away, unless it wasn't someone I knew. The thought made me feel even more violated somehow. A stranger in my house. A stranger who'd been watching me sleep, watching me move through my private space. The randomness of it felt almost worse than if it had been someone I knew. Officer Cole took the frame and the camera into evidence, explaining that they'd run it through the system, try to match it to known equipment used by other streamers. She gave me a case number and told me to call if I remembered anything else. Then they left, and the house felt even emptier than before. Miretta stayed for another hour, sitting at my kitchen table with her laptop, trying to trace the stream back to its source. I watched her work, watched the frustration grow on her face as each avenue led to a dead end. "Whoever this is, they're good," she said finally, closing her laptop. "Really good. They've covered their tracks well." What do I do? I asked. You change your locks, you install a security system, you file a formal report with the platform. She paused, looking at me carefully. And you try not to panic. We'll figure this out. But I was already panicking. I was already imagining all the ways this could have happened, all the vulnerabilities in my home I'd never considered before. How many other cameras were there? How many other places had been compromised? I changed my locks that afternoon, hiring a locksmith to come out on short notice. I spent the rest of the day searching my house again, more frantically this time, pulling apart my bedroom, my bathroom, my living room. I found nothing else, but the paranoia had taken root. Every shadow seemed suspicious. Every object seemed like it could hide a lens. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, a bed that no longer felt like mine, and stared at the ceiling, thinking about all those strangers who'd watched me sleep. How many had there been? How long had they watched? What had they seen? The questions circled endlessly, each one more invasive than the last. My phone buzzed at 2 a.m. with a message from an unknown number. Just 2 words. I know. My heart stopped. My hands went numb. Someone was contacting me. Someone knew that I'd found the camera. Someone was watching me closely enough to know that I'd discovered their violation. I showed the message to Miretta when she came over in the morning. She photographed it, forwarded it to Officer Cole, and then sat across from me at my kitchen table with an expression of grim determination. "This person is escalating," she said. "They're trying to intimidate you." "It's working," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We need to take more aggressive steps," Miretta continued. "I'm going to set up some monitoring software on your phone and your home network. I'm going to try to trace this message back to its source. And we're going to figure out who this person is." But even as she said it, I could see the doubt in her eyes. We were dealing with someone who was tech-savvy, careful, and increasingly bold. Someone who'd already violated my home and was now reaching out to me directly. The advantage was entirely theirs. The messages came every few hours after that. "I know where you keep your car keys. I know your daughter's schedule. I know you take medication for your blood pressure." Each one more specific than the last. Each one a reminder that someone was watching me, learning about me, documenting my life. I reported each message to Officer Cole, who seemed increasingly concerned, but also increasingly helpless. Without more information about the source, there wasn't much the police could do. The messages were coming through a service that masked the sender's location. The platform had no record of who'd created the StreamVault account. It was like trying to catch smoke with my bare hands. Miretta moved into my guest bedroom. She said it was to help me feel safer, but I knew it was also because she was frightened. Frightened for me, frightened by the escalation, frightened by the realization that someone out there had decided to make me their target. We set up security cameras throughout my house, real ones this time, that we controlled. We installed motion sensors on all the doors and windows. We changed my phone number and my email address. We did everything we could think of to reclaim control of my space, but it never felt like enough. The messages kept coming. Sometimes they were just observations. "You wore the blue sweater today. You cried during the movie." Sometimes they were threats. "I can get in whenever I want. You can't stop me." Sometimes they were almost conversational. "Why don't you talk to anyone? Don't you get lonely?" That last one hit differently. It wasn't a threat or an observation. It was a question, and it felt personal in a way the others didn't. This person wasn't just watching me. They were studying me. They were trying to understand me, to get inside my head. I started keeping a journal of the messages, writing them down by hand in a notebook, trying to find patterns. Was there a time of day when they were more likely to contact me? Was there a particular type of message that came more frequently? Was there anything in their language or phrasing that might give away their identity? Miretta was doing her own analysis, running the messages through linguistic analysis software, trying to determine if she could identify any markers that might indicate the sender's age, education level, or background. But everything came back inconclusive. The person was careful with their language, deliberately obscuring any identifying characteristics. 2 weeks after I found the first camera, I got a message that was the crack that split the facade. You want to know who I am? Come to the old warehouse on Riverside Drive at midnight. Come alone. I showed it to Miretta immediately. She read it 3 times, her jaw clenching tighter with each read. Absolutely not, she said flatly. This is obviously a trap. But what if they actually tell me who they are? What if I can finally understand why they're doing this? Jeline, no. Miretta's voice was sharp, commanding. This person has already violated your home, threatened you, and now they're trying to lure you somewhere isolated. This is how people get hurt. I knew she was right. Every rational part of my brain knew that going to that warehouse was a terrible idea. But there was another part of me, a part that had been violated and humiliated and terrorized for 2 weeks, that wanted answers. That wanted to confront this person and demand to know why they'd chosen me. I didn't tell Miretta I was going. I waited until she was asleep. Then I got in my car and drove to Riverside Drive. The warehouse was exactly as abandoned as I'd imagined it would be. A massive structure of corrugated metal and broken windows, surrounded by empty parking lots and chain-link fences. I pulled up at 11:55 p.m. and sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. At exactly midnight, a figure emerged from the shadows of the warehouse. It was Hewer Delgado, my neighbor from 4 houses down. The man I'd waved to in passing for the past 8 years. The man who'd helped me carry groceries once when my car broke down. The man I'd never thought about twice. He walked toward my car with his hands in his pockets, and I felt like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be the person who'd violated my home. I got out of the car, my legs shaking. Why? I asked, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears, raw and broken. Hewer stopped a few feet away from me, and in the dim light from the street lamp, I could see his face clearly for the first time. He looked tired, worn down, almost sad. Because you were always so careful, he said, so closed off, so alone in that house. I wanted to know what you were really like when you thought no one was watching. So you violated my privacy? You invaded my home? You terrified me? I was trying to understand you, he said, and there was something almost pleading in his voice. You've lived on my street for 8 years, and I've never seen you smile. I've never seen you laugh. I've never seen you do anything but go to work and come home and lock yourself away. I wanted to know if there was anything underneath all that coldness. I stared at him, trying to make sense of his words, trying to understand how someone could justify what he'd done with such a simple explanation. That's not your decision to make, I said quietly. My privacy isn't something you get to take because you're curious about me. I know, he said, and he sounded genuinely remorseful. I know that now. I've been thinking about it constantly since you found the camera. I've been thinking about how you must have felt, how violated you must have been, and I hate myself for it. But I also wanted to meet you, to actually talk to you. Because the person I saw in those streams, the real you, when you thought no one was watching, I thought maybe she was someone I could connect with. The audacity of it took my breath away. He'd violated my home, my privacy, my sense of safety, and now he was trying to frame it as some kind of twisted romantic gesture. "You need to turn yourself in," I said, my voice steady now, the shock giving way to something colder and more controlled. "You need to tell the police what you did." "I will," he said. "I will if that's what you want. But first, I want you to know that I'm sorry. Genuinely sorry. I made a terrible mistake, and I've been trying to figure out how to fix it ever since you found that camera." "You can't fix this," I said. "You can't undo what you did. You can't give me back the feeling of safety in my own home." I got back in my car and drove away, leaving him standing alone in that empty parking lot. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely steer. I pulled over 2 blocks away and called the police, giving them Hewer's name and location, explaining everything. Officer Cole arrived within 20 minutes. I watched from my car as they arrested Hewer, watched as they read him his rights, and put him in the back of a patrol car. It should have felt like closure, but it didn't. It felt like the beginning of something else entirely. The next few weeks were consumed with the legal process. Hewer was charged with invasion of privacy, illegal surveillance, and harassment. He had a lawyer who tried to argue that he hadn't actually done anything harmful, that he was just observing, that there was no malicious intent. But the evidence was clear, and the judge wasn't sympathetic to his arguments. I had to testify in court, had to sit in a room with Hewer, and explain to a judge and jury what it had felt like to discover that someone had been watching me. I had to describe the violation, the fear, the way it had changed how I felt about my own home. And through it all, Hewer sat there with an expression of deep sadness, like he was the real victim in this situation. He was convicted and sentenced to 18 months in prison and 5 years of probation. It was a light sentence, lighter than I'd hoped for. But it was something. It was acknowledgement that what he'd done was wrong. It was validation that my violation mattered. But even after the conviction, even after he was locked away, the damage remained. I couldn't walk through my house without thinking about those cameras, without imagining his eyes on me. I couldn't sleep with the lights off. I couldn't shower without checking every corner of the bathroom first. Mureta wanted me to move, to find a new house where I could start fresh. But I refused. I wouldn't let him take my home from me. Instead, I installed a full security system, cameras in every room, motion sensors on every door and window, an alarm system connected directly to the police station. I reclaimed my space through technology and vigilance. 3 months after Hewer's conviction, I was finally able to sleep through the night without waking in a panic. 6 months after, I could shower without checking every corner first. A year after, I started to feel like my home was mine again. But something fundamental had changed in me. The walls I'd built around my privacy had been breached, and I'd learned that no amount of caution could completely protect me from the world's invasions. Other people would always find ways to violate boundaries, to take what wasn't theirs to take. The only thing I could control was how I responded to those violations. I started volunteering with a nonprofit that worked with victims of privacy violations and surveillance abuse. I used my experience to help others who'd gone through similar traumas, to help them navigate the legal system, to help them reclaim their sense of safety. It wasn't revenge, exactly, but it was a way of transforming my violation into something meaningful. Mureta remained vigilant about my security, updating my systems regularly, checking for new vulnerabilities. We'd grown closer through the experience, bonded by trauma and its aftermath. She understood in a way that few people could what it meant to have your sanctuary violated. And Hewer remained in prison, serving his sentence, probably thinking about the woman he'd tried to understand by watching her sleep. I hoped he was learning something from his punishment, that he was understanding the gravity of what he'd done. But I didn't think about him much anymore. He'd taken enough of my mental energy already. The experience had changed how I thought about privacy, about safety, about the invisible ways technology could be used to violate and control. It had shown me that the world was more dangerous and more invasive than I'd imagined. But it had also shown me that I was stronger than I'd thought, that I could survive violation and emerge on the other side with my dignity intact. My home was mine again, and I would never let anyone take it from me. If you're experiencing privacy violations or surveillance abuse, contact the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative for support and resources.